You get home, door closes, and your whole body just lets go, like it was quietly bracing for something the entire time you were out there. Nobody was rude to you, nothing bad happened, you were just around people, and somehow that was enough to run your battery completely flat. If that sounds familiar, good, stay here, because what's actually happening in your brain in that moment is way more interesting than you're just introverted. Psychology has a different name for it, and once you hear it, you're going to stop apologizing for needing the quiet. Here's what nobody actually tells you about introverts. The ones who need the most silence are often running the most complex internal worlds, not because they're brooding or difficult or allergic to fun, but because their brains are genuinely processing more than most people's more of the time. Research consistently links introversion with deeper cognitive processing, stronger pattern recognition, and higher emotional sensitivity. And when you layer a high IQ onto that, you get a very specific set of everyday habits that look completely unremarkable from the outside. Weird, even. But they're not weird. They're actually just your brain doing exactly what it was built to do. There are 8 of them, and you probably do most of them without even thinking about it. Let's start with that moment at the door, the one where your whole body decompresses like you've been holding your breath for 6 hours. Psychologists call this social recovery, and for introverts with a high IQ, it's not a character flaw or a sign that something went wrong today. It's a direct result of how much cognitive bandwidth you were using out there. Here's what's happening. When you're in a social environment, your brain isn't just making conversation. It's tracking micro-expressions, reading emotional undertones, processing what people mean underneath what they're actually saying, and running a near-constant background check on the energy in the room. That is an enormous amount of mental work. Most people around you are skimming the surface of social interaction. You're reading the whole novel. Neuroscience research shows that people who prefer solitude already operate at a higher baseline of internal stimulation. Adding a full day of external input on top of that doesn't energize you. It overloads you, so that exhale when the door closes. That's not you failing at being a person. That's your nervous system finally getting permission to come back online. You walk into a space, and before anyone speaks, you already know who's tense, who's faking it, and which 2 people in the corner definitely just had a disagreement. You didn't ask for this information. It just arrived. Psychologists call this emotional perceptiveness, and research suggests around 15 to 20% of people carry it at a heightened level. Your nervous system is calibrated to pick up signals that most people don't consciously register at all. You're tuned to a frequency that's always broadcasting, whether you want it to be or not. Now, here's the part nobody mentions. This isn't always comfortable. When you feel everything in a room at full volume all day, the only way to hear yourself again is to get out of the room. Solitude isn't antisocial. It's how you return to your own signal after spending hours absorbing everyone else's. And here's the intelligence connection. Research links this kind of heightened perceptiveness with stronger working memory, faster pattern recognition, and more nuanced decision-making. You're not oversensitive. You're operating more information at once than most people realize is even available. You find something interesting, and then you find out everything about it. Not because you planned to, just because one thread led to another, and suddenly it's 2 a.m. and you're reading a 47-page Wikipedia article about the history of competitive crossword puzzles or Byzantine architecture, or why certain species of fungi communicate through underground networks. You weren't supposed to end up here, and yet here you are. Psychologists call this hyperfocus, an intense, sustained absorption in a topic or task that completely shuts out everything else. It's common in highly intelligent people, and particularly common in introverts, whose brains are already wired to prefer depth over breadth. The reason this happens isn't distraction or obsession, it's your brain doing the thing it's genuinely best at, finding patterns, making connections, and going deeper than most people would think to go. Think of it like Gandalf refusing to give you a straight answer. There's always another layer, and your brain finds that genuinely irresistible. The same cognitive engine that drives your hyperfocus is what makes introverts with high IQs disproportionately represented in research, writing, music, and any field that rewards deep, sustained thinking over constant external collaboration. You probably have a very small number of people you'd actually call close. Not because you're bad at people, because your brain runs a very specific cost-benefit analysis on every social interaction, entirely without your permission. Shallow conversation costs you more than it costs other people. Your brain is using more processing power per interaction, picking up more signals, running more interpretations. So it becomes quite efficient at deciding which conversations are worth the energy expenditure. A 2016 study from the London School of Economics and Singapore Management University, using data from over 15,000 adults, found that highly intelligent people reported lower life satisfaction the more frequently they socialized with friends. While most people feel better with more social contact, that pattern reversed for high IQ individuals. Their brains, it seems, are wired to derive more from solitude and depth than from volume, which is why your circle is small. It's not a limitation, it's curation. The people who made it through your filter know they're there because they're genuinely worth the bandwidth. That's actually a very generous thing, even if it doesn't look like it from the outside. If any of this is landing for you, a subscribe keeps the club growing and helps more people find their way here. A thumbs up goes a long way too, and I'm genuinely curious, which of these habits felt most like looking in a mirror? Drop it in the comments. You narrate things to yourself quietly or out loud, depending on how much you trust whoever's nearby. You think through decisions by talking them through. You process your day like you're filing a report to yourself on the commute home. This is called self-directed speech, and despite how odd it might look to a coworker catching you muttering at your laptop, it's actually a sign of strong cognitive function. Psychologists Gary Lupien and Daniel Swingley at the University of Wisconsin found that talking yourself through a task improves focus, speeds up visual processing, and strengthens working memory. Your brain uses language as a tool for thinking, not just communicating. When you verbalize something, you're giving it structure. You're making it easier to hold in your working memory, examine from different angles, and actually reach a conclusion rather than just going in circles internally. The inner monologue that runs all day long, the quiet narration, the habit of thinking out loud when no one's watching, that's not a quirk. That's your cognitive system doing an extra pass on everything because it can and because it finds it genuinely useful. Here's a counterintuitive one. Highly intelligent people are often very comfortable saying, "I don't know," not as a deflection, as an honest position. This connects to something psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect, the tendency for people with limited knowledge in an area to significantly overestimate what they know. The flip side is that people with deeper knowledge and higher cognitive ability tend to be far more aware of how much they don't know. The more you understand about any topic, the more clearly you can see the edges of that understanding. So while someone with surface-level knowledge will state their position confidently and loudly, the person who's actually studied it is usually the one saying, "Well, it depends," or "I'd want to look into that more." That's not uncertainty. That's intellectual honesty, and it's a surprisingly rare trait. If you've ever felt quietly frustrated watching someone speak with enormous confidence about something they clearly don't understand deeply, you know exactly what this feels like from the other side. In a conversation, especially a group one, you observe first. You take in how people are interacting, what the dynamics are, who's actually listening, who's just waiting for their turn to talk. And then when you do speak, you've already thought about what you want to say. This can look like shyness. It isn't. It's pattern recognition applied to social behavior. You're gathering information before acting on it, which is precisely what good thinking looks like in every other context. We call it research in science, reconnaissance in strategy, and reading the room in human dynamics. In introverts, it just happens automatically. Research on highly intelligent individuals consistently shows this observe first tendency as a marker of what's called reflective processing, the habit of pausing to evaluate before responding rather than reacting immediately. It's associated with better decision-making, fewer impulsive choices, and stronger long-term outcomes. Incidentally, it's also why introverts tend to write excellent emails and give very good advice. They've already run through the scenario several times before they say anything. Your best thinking happens late. Your most interesting ideas arrive when everyone else is asleep. You've tried going to bed at a reasonable hour, and your brain just doesn't accept it as a concept. Some researchers connect this with what's called chronotype flexibility, the idea that people with higher cognitive flexibility adapt more easily to non-standard patterns of wakefulness. Tesla worked through the night. Kafka wrote almost exclusively after midnight. Darwin did his best thinking on long, late evening walks. This isn't a coincidence or a quirk, it's a pattern. The quieter the world gets, the more clearly your internal processing can run. No notifications, no background noise, no ambient social pressure, just your brain and whatever problem or idea it's decided to care about tonight. For an introvert with a high IQ, that is genuinely optimal operating conditions. And yes, this does make standard working hours feel mildly hostile to your natural state. That's not laziness. That's just your brain being honest about when it actually works best. Now, here's something interesting. A lot of these habits, the deep focus, the pattern recognition, the dry humor about your own quirks, show up just as strongly in high IQ people who aren't introverts too. If you're curious what those crossover habits look like and how they show up in everyday life regardless of whether you prefer parties or peace and quiet, that's something worth exploring. We'll be going deeper on that soon. So the next time someone asks you why you're so quiet or wonders why you didn't come to the thing, or seems baffled by how you can spend 4 hours reading about Byzantine trade routes without once checking your phone, you don't owe anyone an explanation. Your brain is just doing what it does. If you've got a micro win from this week, big or small, drop it below. I genuinely love reading them. See you again in the next episode of Micro Wins Club. Small steps towards real change.